suggests that low representation of women in the field of economics may negatively impact the quality of economic research, as perceptions of economic issues may differ between genders. So obviously we know that there's been a lot of evidence that shows that diversity within groups increases the quality of their performance. Thus, you can say that socioeconomic policy may be negatively impacted by a lack of gender diversity among authoritative economists whose published works are often considered by policymakers. If we go on to my data and methodology, my research is basically broken up into two parts, a student analysis and a staff analysis. So the first section analyzes gender compositions of students for undergraduate and postgraduate studies at a national level, and then as well as at a sample of South African universities. This was a sample of only 4 universities, unfortunately, as I said earlier, that the other universities were unwilling or unable to provide me with data. Applications for the data were sent out, and this entailed getting gender compositions for 3 faculties, commerce, science, and engineering at the undergraduate level, as well as the departments that were under those 3 faculties at the postgraduate level. This was to avoid overlapping in registrations in undergrads. So the data analyzes over a period of 6 years, 2013 to 2019. And I tried to identify whether there were changes in the participation of women in these subjects. So trend analysis is used to identify patterns in the gender compositions of students. It examines economics compared to other STEM subjects. Additionally, survey analysis is used to explore the reasons why students have chosen to pursue economics in their university careers. Here, Rhodes was used as a case study. This survey focused on what influenced their decision to take or not take economics, and whether lecturer and tutor gender had any influence over this. So this will be further explained further later on. The second section is a staff analysis. So it's pretty much the same. I looked at national statistics at staff members at South African HEIs according to academic rank. And I looked at the gender compositions over a 6-year period to identify whether there's been progress in participation of women. Trend analysis again was used to reveal the extent and progress in reducing gender imbalances in STEM fields and whether economics stands as an outlier in comparison. Survey analysis was used in order to find whether, to determine what differences in the respondents' opinions and experiences were within their departments, whether there was any gender differences there. So these were all online to make sure that the respondents remained anonymous. And yeah, the questionnaire is basically used to identify whether gender discrimination or bias plays a role in the low proportion of women in economics academia, especially towards the higher ranks in South Africa. So I got my national stats from government publications, Stats South Africa, CHE, and that's Council on Higher Education and the Department of Higher Education and Training. It was student enrollment, success rates, degrees awarded by gender and qualification level, staff academic positions, rank and qualifications held. The other statistics for these 4 universities was obtained directly from the universities, and the qualitative analysis, the surveys, were sent to economic students and academic staff members working in economics departments at various South African universities. So this was then compared to the international literature, which did similar studies, but in the US and the UK. So I started by looking at student enrollment figures in South African HEIs across all faculties between 2007 and 2017, based on publications released by the CHE. So over this period, females averaged 57.9% of total enrollments. Both male and female enrollments grew in numbers over this period. However, female enrollments grew at a faster rate than for males, thus increasing female enrollment as a proportion of total student enrollments by an average of 0.3 percentage points annually over this period. We can see the slight gradual increase here and decrease there. So the results were fairly similar when looking at the percentage proportion of graduating students at South African HEIs by gender. Females make up the majority of graduating students each year. Female graduates are also increasing as a proportion of total student graduates. And so we can see this here in figure 2, the increasing females made up 59.1% of graduating students in 2007 and 61.5% in 2017. Ultimately, females don't only make up the majority of students at South African HEIs, but their chances of graduating are also higher than those of males. There are slight fall-offs, though, of female participation from undergraduate to postgraduate levels. Females make up the majority of student enrollments at the undergraduate and honors levels, but their share of enrollment numbers drops at the master's and doctoral levels. So we can see here undergraduate, honors, master's, doctoral, and the percentage of females. Over this period, females averaged 57.9% of undergraduate enrollments and 63% of honors enrollments. Average female enrollments in master's and doctoral studies dropped to 48.9% and 43.5% respectively. Given that graduation rates are also in favor of females, females make up a substantial majority of those qualifying to proceed with further postgraduate study at the bachelor's and honors levels. This fall-off could suggest biases discouraging women from continuing their studies at the master's and doctorate levels. However, the idea that the higher course success rates may lead to women being more highly sought after for jobs and therefore do not see the need to continue with their studies cannot be dismissed. So here you would need further analysis to determine what those factors are. One thing that is apparent, though, is that the share of female enrollments at all qualifications is increasing. The average annual increase in the share of female enrollments at the undergraduate, honors, and doctorate level was 0.3 percentage points, and the average annual increase at the master's level was 0.6 percentage points. Female course success rates at HEIs are significantly higher than for males at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Over the period 2007 to 2017, the average course success rate amongst the undergraduate females was 78% in comparison to 73% for males. Similar pattern arises in the postgraduate level, where total average course success rates were 71% overall, but 73% for females and 68% for males. You see females total males at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. National data representing the female share of enrollments in bachelor and doctoral degrees in South African HEIs is illustrated in figure 5A and B from 2013 to 2017 according to broad CESM categories, the business, STEM, and humanities, as well as the second order CESM category, economics. The stats for business was recalculated to exclude economics in order to compare it in an isolated way. And humanities includes the social science and education, in which case this may raise female participation. When looking at the figure 5A, we see that humanities has a higher female enrollment than bachelor degrees, with figures in just below 70%. Economics sits on par with STEM at about 50%, but has significantly lower numbers than business and humanities. We can also see that these figures remain fairly constant over this time period. In figure B, however, we can see that there's a sharp drop-off of the share of female enrollments at doctoral levels in all fields. Now all are below the 50% mark. We can see here that now business and economics are the laggards, below STEM and humanities. Also, while STEM and economics show some improvement between 2013 and 2017, business seems to be on a downward trend. Figures 6A and 6B look at bachelor's degrees in the US versus South Africa. It just must be noted that the US figures were using graduates, whereas the South African figures were using enrollments. In which case, since female graduation rates in South Africa are better than males, the female share of degrees awarded may be slightly higher than what is shown here. Humanities, business, and economics in South Africa are all better than in the US, besides STEM. We can also see that the difference between economics and the other fields is much larger in the US than in South Africa. Our business is better and STEM is much worse, and here we can see that this difference is much larger here and here. At the doctoral level, depicted in figures 7A and B, female figures in humanities for South Africa are only slightly below that of the US, but business and STEM are substantially lower. Business and STEM in the US have experienced sharp increases in female degrees awarded though, but in South Africa, even though female participation in STEM is improving, this is at a very slow rate, and business is on a downward trend. So whilst economics in South Africa is only slightly better than in the US, there are signs of improvement in South Africa, unlike in the US, with an upward trend and a somewhat downward trend there. In order to more fully understand the nature of female participation in traditionally male-dominated fields and determine whether there have been any significant changes over time, the gender compositions of students at 4 research-intensive universities in South Africa were also analysed over the period 2013 to 2019. The names of the universities have remained anonymous and therefore are referred to as University 1, 2, 3, and 4. Only 3 faculties have been analysed at the undergraduate level, which is commerce, science, and engineering. It should also be noted, however, that University 1 does not have an engineering faculty, and therefore comparative studies for this faculty will be between the other 3. At the undergraduate level, gender compositions have been analysed per faculty as to avoid overlapping of student registrations for interfaculty subjects. Unfortunately, there are some gaps in the data, as University 3 couldn't provide 2013 data and University 4 was unable to provide 2013 and 14 data. At the postgraduate level, gender compositions have been analysed per department. For simplicity purposes and due to the fact that some universities combine departments whereas others have them as separate, I've combined departments that are of a similar nature. So we can see there here, biochem, micro, molecular and cell bio, and biotech, and the BMC, biology, botany, zoo, and entomology, BZE, earth science, environmental science, geography, geology, EGG, maths and applied maths, MAT, and the rest are individually. Here we can see that average figures between 2013 and 2019. At University 1 and 4, there's a higher female share enrolled in commerce, but a lower share in university 2 and 3, and this seems to be swapped the other way around. So they have a lower female share in science at university 1 and 4, but higher at university 2 and 3. Engineering in general across all universities and time is really low, in the 20th and 30th percentiles. The lower proportion of female students enrolled in science and engineering corresponds with Van Broekhuizen and Spoor, who find that in South Africa, women are less likely to enroll in the fields of engineering, computer science, and mathematical sciences. They find that males are more inclined to enroll in fields that are perceived to be more difficult and have higher failure rates, which coincides with Jacobson, who finds that women tend to be less confident in their academic abilities, specifically also when it comes to maths-based subjects. When looking at the postgraduate honours data for all 4 universities, there are clear differences in female representation across universities and across years. Annual statistics are quite sporadic in nature and don't seem to follow any specific trend. For university 2 and 3, females consistently made up just less than half of student enrollments in economics, while at university 1 and 4, female enrollments for economics jumped around within the 30th, 40th, and 50th percentiles. Furthermore, the average female enrollments for economics honours for each university is low compared to the national average of 54.2%, as seen here in table 4, and is much lower than the percentage share of female enrollments for honours studies across all subjects, which was 63.5%. In the departments of IS, maths, stats, computer science, and physics, there is a much lower percentage of female honours students than in economics, with computer science and physics being the lowest. However, honours classes in subjects like physics and statistics tend to be very small at all 4 universities, and thus small changes in the number of students can result in large changes in the share of females. This is, however, not necessarily the case for computer science, whereby it seems that computer science generally just has a problem in attracting female students. It is only in the departments of BMC, BZE, CM, and EGT that there are a large proportion of females than in economics. At the master's level, there are big differences between the 4 universities. Some departments at some universities experience drop-offs in female participation when going from honours to master's level, while others experienced increases. The 2 departments that experienced the largest drop-offs were BMC and BZE. Only at University 1 does the share of females studying economics drop sharply from honours to masters, whereas at University 3, the share was virtually unchanged, and at Universities 2 and 4, the female share rose at the master's level. In a general sense, economics has a lower share of female enrollments in master's studies than the life sciences and most of the physical sciences, but is higher than the mathematical and computer sciences, physics, and engineering. When comparing the master's percentages to the national statistics in table 6, the proportion of females in economics at University 1 and 3 are below the national benchmark of 45.4%. Generally, those subjects that do well, per se, in attracting females at the honours level continue to do well at the master's level, and those who do badly at the honours level continue to do badly, and in some cases actually get worse. The more significant drop-offs of female enrollments within the analysed departments happens at the doctoral levels, with the exception of the life sciences. Generally, BMC and BZE still remain within the 50th and 60th percentiles for female enrollments in doctoral studies across all 4 universities. Table 7 shows that the average proportion of females enrolled in economics in the 4 universities drops from the 40th and 50th percentiles at the master's levels to the 30th percentile range for doctoral studies. However, economics is still generally better than IS, computer science, physics, and the mathematical sciences and all of engineering, and worse than the life sciences and the remaining physical sciences. University 2 and 4 have higher enrollment figures for females in doctoral studies than the national benchmark depicted in Table 8, yet University 1 and 3 are below. The last section of the student analysis looks at the survey responses from the economic students. For this section, Rhodes University was used as a case study, and so Rhodes University students alone were invited to answer the questionnaires. This was all done online, and the link was sent by the Rhodes DMU. As I've explained, there were 3 groups in which was supposed to be analyzed, but the third group had to be excluded due to the fact that only 2 people responded. One of the major limitations in this section was the low response rate. Besides having to exclude the third group, I received only 16 responses from the Economics 3 surveys and 28 from the Economics Honours surveys. The student surveys aim to investigate the possible factors that influence the student's decision to pursue economics at university. This is where it would have been helpful to have the students who did Economics 3 but didn't continue with economics at the honours level, as it would have given insight into some of the factors that discourage students from pursuing economics further. I also wanted to see what the influence of role models were, as this seems to be quite a prominent influence that pops up in a lot of the literature, that role models play a significant or have a significant influence on students, especially females. However, the results from the student survey show that role models had little to no influence on either the female or male respondents, both for Economics 3 students and the honours students. So here you can see how I visually compared answers. So this was the influence of female role models and the influence of male role models. So we can see that female role models had much less of an impact on males than male role models did, and vice versa for females. Basically the similar type results for economics honours students. The 2 main factors which influenced the respondents' decision to pursue economics was actually the potential for job opportunities and possible career advancement. The female students, respondents were more concerned with being good at economics, whereas males attached a greater importance to obtaining the skills that studying economics provides. This was expressed in both the Economics 3 and Honours student surveys, and it reflects the basis of Avilova and Golden's paper, which concludes that women are more likely to pursue a subject in which they excel, whereas men are more likely to pursue that in which provides them with the skills to benefit them in the future. In this next section, we look at academic staff members. First at the national statistics, then staff working in various departments at the sample of universities, and lastly, the staff surveys. While the analysis at the student level nationally provides little evidence of serious gender bias in South Africa, in terms of overall student numbers across all faculties, the staff statistics paint a very different picture. National data between 2007 and 2017 on staff members at all South African HEIs was obtained from CHE online publications. In order for the data on the gender compositions of staff members at South African HEIs, in looking at the data, we find that women make up the majority of administrative staff, while men make up the majority of academic staff and senior management. So you can see how the percentage of females drops here. In looking at the academic staff only, the proportion of females decreases as you move up the academic ladder. At a national level, you can see that the majority of those who are below the junior lecturer level are female, and this decreases as you move up the ranks, you get less, the proportion of females gets lower and lower. At a national level, females make up 64.6% of academic staff below the junior lecturer level, and this gets smaller and smaller as you move up. So this is just a visual representation of what's here. In my full research, I obtained the data for these academic ranks at the top 10 South African universities. I used the national statistics as a benchmark and analyzed whether they follow a similar trend. So we see this here. Basically, yes, they do. We can see the shaded blocks represent ranks in which females hold the majority share. So we can see that this is predominantly the more junior levels, with the exception of here. I looked at the same statistics for the, but for the 4 universities that was in my sample. However, I broke it down further into the percentage proportion of females in each academic rank per department. So we can see here in table 9 that the percentage of female academic staff members displays combined averages for all 4 universities across the time period 2013 to 2019, and is broken down by subject and academic rank. The shaded cells show where there are 50% or more females working in that department and rank. So we can see it's not that many, and majority in the lower ranks. The international literature suggests that females dominate the lower ranks even in predominantly male-dominated fields, but this doesn't seem to be the case within these 4 universities. Increasingly though, if one compares the average percentage of females in the various fields and academic ranks in table 9 to the national proportion of female academic staff members as a whole per rank seen in table 8, economics is the only department in which has a higher percentage of female professors than the national average of 29%. We see here, it's the only one here that's higher than the national average. Table 10 now looks at the economics departments of each of the 4 universities separately. We see here in University 1 and 2 don't have any junior lecturers, but females make up the majority of junior lecturers at universities 3 and 4. Within the rank of lecturer, females are the majority at University 1 and 2, and males dominate the rest. You can see visually represented, but you can see it better on the table. In summary, the data for the 4 universities confirm the national drop-off in the proportion of females as one progresses up the ranks of academia. This is problematic not just in terms of fairness and efficiency, but also because of the resultant lack of female role models for female students. With minor exceptions, the fields of commerce, science, and engineering perform worse than the national averages for female share of academics as a whole. Females make up the majority of staff for only a few subjects and mainly at junior levels. Economics has the highest share of full professors for the subjects examined, but the proportion is still less than 1/3. In order to try and understand the possible reasons for the low share of females in economics at more senior levels of academia, a survey was conducted. This survey was set up on an online platform to ensure that respondents remain anonymous. Some of the questions were adapted from a similar survey that was done by the American Economic Association on AA members, and other questions were drafted by the researcher. Potential respondents were identified by their attendance at the ERSA conference in Joburg last August. Additionally, email addresses of academic staff working in the economics departments of various South African universities were also obtained via the university's websites. Surveys were sent to 200 academic economists, of which only 40 usable answered questionnaires were usable. From the respondents, 62.5% were male and 37.5% were female. This is unsurprising, though, given the dominance of males amongst academic economists. The survey mainly focused on respondents' opinions and experiences working as an academic economist. Since the survey is quite long, I'm not going to go through all of it, but I've taken out a few of the questions and answers which I found particularly interesting, and I'll talk about. We can see in these two figures here that when posed with the question, do you feel valued and intellectually included in your workplace, both males and female respondents do feel valued and intellectually included, but there are still gender differences. So as you can see, way more male respondents select always for feeling valued in comparison to females, and more females selected sometimes in comparison to male respondents. However, one cannot really just assume that this difference is solely a gender-related issue, and it is possible that academic seniority has an influence on the respondents' answers. For example, the only female to answer always to the question of whether they feel valued was a professor. And likewise, the 4 male respondents who answered sometimes and never hold less seniority, as they were lecturers and junior lecturers. Represented in this graph over here is the proportion of respondents who have done any of the listed actions in order to avoid possible harassment or discrimination or unfair treatment. The majority of respondents, both male and female, checked non-applicable, and this paints quite a positive picture for the economics environment in South African academia. However, there are still gender differences as there's a 19 percentage point difference in favor of men. In other terms, 72% of men reported non-applicable in comparison to 53% of females. We can also see that in all of the other instances, females were more likely to do something to avoid possible harassment or discrimination than the males. So the last question in the survey asked the respondents what they thought to be the most influential factor contributing to lower female participation in economics. The majority stated that the lack of female role models in the departments affects the number of female students taking economics at university. However, we saw in the student surveys that this wasn't necessarily the case, but the sample size for the surveys of the students was really small. So in order to get a more accurate description there, you would need a much larger sample size. The respondents also gave some interesting comments, of which I've included just a few here. The comments generally highlighted that the slow progression of women through the ranks can be heavily influenced by the presence of children. Taking maternity leave and having to deal with small children will affect one's productivity as well as publication rates, which is a major consideration for promotion. I was also particularly fascinated that both a male and female respondent highlighted the insufficient support structures that universities have for women with young children. In those years where the children are too young to go to school or even preschool, there needs to be someone at home looking after them, and not all families will be able to sustain the financial burden of a caretaker. So basically, in conclusion, male and female enrollments in South African HEIs have grown, but females at a faster rate. Females have a higher pass rate than males, and therefore are a greater proportion of graduates. There's a drop-off in female representation when progressing to Masters and Doctoral studies. This is both nationally and at the sampled universities. We see that female enrollment figures at the 4 universities across the departments are quite sporadic in nature and don't follow any particular trend. This made it quite difficult to compare to international findings. Considering that female students make up the majority share of the lower levels of academic study and males the majority of the higher levels of academic study, we can see that there's a similar presentation when looking at academic staff in South African HEIs, and this, it could be a spillover into the labour force. The South African pattern is similar to that revealed in the international literature, where female academic staff dominate the lower ranks nationally, even in the traditionally male-dominated fields. But when looking at the 4 analysed universities, it was seen that the males actually dominated most of the departments under most of the faculties. Under the faculties of science, engineering, and commerce. The idea that a lack of female role models is a significant contributor to low female students in male-dominated fields, especially economics, was expressed in the academic staff surveys. However, the student surveys revealed that role models, male or female, had little to no influence on students' decision to pursue economics. So there are 2 possible reasons for this. Firstly, it may be that those female students who were influenced by female and male role models decided to pursue a subject other than economics, which have a higher representation of senior female staff. Or alternatively, that it may be that the influence of female role models on female students may be subliminal and so not reflect the student answers to the survey. Generally, it seems that there's not really much concern of gender bias at a student level. It just becomes problematic at the staff level, where there's indications of gender bias there. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Siobhan. We'll take questions now. So you can just unmute yourself if you have a question. Jen has a question in the chat. So she has a question about how to address gender bias in academic staff. So things like additional childcare support might be easier to provide, but what to do about the lack of confidence that might be holding some women back?
I think this starts more at a younger level in school, where women should be encouraged to take maths and pursue the sciences. And that would come in later into the university level. But in terms of, say, if you want to do that at the university level, I think it's important for lecturers to take an interest in their students and really encourage them to pursue those subjects. Really encourage female students to pursue the sciences, the maths, the economics, and all of that. And I think if they feel like they're more encouraged and they have a lot more support, they're more likely to take that subject.
Shirin, I see your hand is raised. Oh, sorry, Nansa.
I just have just a quick question. Do you know if there are generational effects in the sense that, I mean, if you're thinking of older faculty who are professors, you might have different dynamics from the young academics who are just coming into the stream. I know you show a table where you group them by ranking in the university, but can you say anything about the age of the faculty and the dynamics by age as opposed to by rank?
No, not really. I did, in my survey analysis of the staff, I did mention the proportion of the respondents by age category. But I didn't really go too much in depth with generational factors.
Sharon, do you want to ask your question?
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. I'm particularly interested in the selection of the universities in terms of both previously advantaged, disadvantaged, also by race, and the final issue would be by different economic subsectors. So, for example, you know, because I'm dealing with a lot of young people who are doing agricultural economics, etc. Were you able to find any differences, or did you do that kind of analysis?
I applied to a lot of different universities, but most of them couldn't give me the data. So I didn't actually get any data for previously disadvantaged universities, unfortunately. And I didn't look at race purely for the fact that there is a lot of literature done in South Africa around race. So I wanted to focus more on gender because there are a lot of studies to do with race in South Africa. So I didn't look at that too much. But yeah, unfortunately, because of the lack of data that I was able to get my hands on, I wasn't able to really look at differences between different types of universities, as before that I had were all for research intensive universities.
Fiona, I see you have a question in the chat. Do you want to ask it?
Your microphone isn't on.
Okay, I'll just read. So Fiona says, extremely interesting subject. I would love to understand at a deeper level reasons for subject choice and career choice, maybe a PhD in 5 years.
Is this me personally, or just in what I found in my studies?
Not sure. Fiona, maybe. I don't think she's still here. Okay,
well,
maybe.
In terms of what I found in the survey is that most of the respondents chose economics because of the possible career advancements and you know, the pay that you get and progression in your career. So it was more career orientated than anything else. But yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay, well, Jen also has a question.
Hi, thanks very much. I was just wondering if maybe the low response rates that you got, Siobhan, also speaks to the lack of focus on the gender bias issue within universities. So, you know, maybe this is just not seen as a problem. It hasn't been kind of foregrounded before, so it's not data that's collected. Is that maybe an impression you got?
It could be. It definitely could be. I think not necessarily for the students. Unfortunately, the questionnaires were sent out at a time where it was just before SWAT week. So I don't think students really looked at those emails or wanted to take the time out to answer. So I think that was pretty much one of the big reasons that I didn't get a big response rate from the students. In terms of the staff questionnaires, it's definitely a consideration. I mean, out of the ones I did get, you could see that people were very aware of gender issues. So it could be that those who didn't reply didn't see that there was much of a problem. In the States, and the survey done by the AEA, you saw a lot of the male respondents felt that there wasn't any gender issues and there's no bias or discrimination, and women don't take economics because they're not interested in it, and that it's not because there are factors discouraging them or this glass ceiling that prevents them from getting promoted. So that definitely could be a factor here as well. It's hard to know unless, you know, they respond to your surveys. But yeah.
Thanks for that answer.
Stubborn economist.
Hi, sorry, my name is Maria. Sorry about that. So I'm just wondering, with regards to academic staff, whether you have also checked the number of female staff members who eventually became professors who were awarded full-time professorship, whether you checked also the gap between the male and female in that regard.
Are you talking about the promotion time?
Yeah, the also the number of female academic staff who are professors and yes.
Yes, I in my surveys I did take notes of the percentage of female and male. So I'm sure I put it in here somewhere.
Sorry, I might have missed that.
No, don't worry. Yeah, 62.5% were male and 37.5% were female. So I did take note of that. I didn't look at progression time in terms of promotion. No, not in the study.
Okay, thanks.
Sanele?
Do you believe results from the 4 universities can be generalized to all South African universities? No, definitely not. You need a much larger sample. You know, at least you could use at least 10. I think there's about 22, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But yeah, not really. It would have been great to have a larger sample size. But I think it just gives you an idea. It's almost like a starting point. And further research, it could inspire, hopefully, others to conduct further research on a much larger scale, which would be interesting to see once you increase those sample size, where these 4 universities represent similar results to all South African universities. But I think, in the national stats, you saw that there wasn't huge differentiations between the 4 universities sampled and the national statistics. The only thing is that the national statistics didn't always have the more specific data that I needed, and was more generalized to, say, faculties instead of individual departments.
Siobhan, this is Johan Fedeker. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. So I had 2 very brief comments and then 1 question for you. The one was that the way in which you approach the role model question raises, in effect, another sort of secondary possibility for me. And that is that the role models may be important, but not necessarily in such a way that it's correlated with gender. So role models may be important in the sense that for students wanting to continue with the discipline, it's important that they feel enabled by somebody. And that enabling environment may not be correlated necessarily with the gender of the faculty member that they are interacting with. So, role models may be important, but not in the way in which you were trying to get it in terms of your survey. So that's just a comment on the function of role models.
Yeah.
Then a second comment that I had was that if you take a look at the undergraduate gender breakdown in the STEM disciplines in economics, they are effectively fully representative. If I understood your data correctly, you were coming up with the result that in STEM and economics, actually the gender split was essentially 50-50. So it's exactly right, in effect, in terms of population composition. And that the big differential really begins to arise in the postgraduate arena, and that then raises the question of why. And I found it interesting that in the academic survey, the survey of academic faculty, you reported the response of one female respondent who said that it's effectively the expected earnings that graduates have in the workplace, that women essentially respond very proactively to the high expected earnings that they can earn in the labor market, and that they therefore do not carry on into postgraduate studies. So I wonder whether you could comment a little bit more about that. And then finally, I had a question for you, and that is that one of the sort of anecdotal pieces of evidence that often crops up when it comes to economics is that it is a discipline that is associated with quite a lot of intellectual aggression in things like seminars and presentations, and that is something that may have an influence on gender choice. I mean, the choices by genders to continue with the study of economics. Now, I don't think you pursued that in your particular survey, but I wonder whether you could comment on that. Thanks.
Okay, well, just to start with the latter, I did actually look at that in the surveys. I asked the respondents whether they felt that either the economics conferences that they've attended or their departmental meetings are found to be aggressive or belligerent or hostile, as this has come up in the AEA survey, where a lot of the females did feel that way. And you're right, economics conferences can be quite intellectually aggressive. Surprisingly enough, it didn't actually seem like that here. There were a couple instances where people felt that, those who are more senior tend to, almost sit on a high horse. And that every now and again you have someone who is trying to make a point and show their intellectual superiority. But all in all, they found that most of the time it's normally fine, and they don't feel like they're in hostile environments. One respondent did comment that when a female heads their departmental meetings, you have less disruption, less people trying to interrupt and speak over one another, which I found quite interesting. But yeah, I did look at that, and it seems that here it seems to be a lot better than in the US. In the US, it seems to be particularly aggressive. And with what was the first question? You wanted me to comment a little bit more on.
I was just reflecting on the fact that role models, yes. Role models which are enabling may not be correlated with gender. It may be more correlated with the nature of the attitude that the role model brings to bear. I mean, does the role model bring out, in a sense, the intellectual curiosity of the student or not? And that may be correlated with gender, but it may not. And so, the type of role model may not be, the required role model may not be something that has any mapping into gender, but it has mapping into other characteristics.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that would be a very good thing to try and investigate further. And you know, I think when students feel like they have someone in their corner, you know, for lack of a better phrase, they're more likely to stay in that subject. They don't feel like they're necessarily left behind, and they have that support that they can go and talk to their role model or the lecturers. And you know, I think students struggle with the fact that they often feel like they don't grasp the work, but they don't feel comfortable enough going and asking questions. So I think that kind of a culture would encourage people to stick with a subject regardless of gender. Just having a lecturer or staff member that, you know, feels that is helping you and being there for you would make a massive difference.
Related to that, one thought I had was, so I think on your slide where you look at the role model question, it seemed like there were a few honest students who felt that a female role model really had made a difference for them. And I wondered, yeah, that major influence orange block. So I wondered if that was really just like one professor, so kind of someone who created this kind of environment.
It could have been. They weren't asked to elaborate on the questions. But yeah, I'm sure this was obviously just an analysis of the Rhodes students. So there's few female staff members in the Rhodes economics department. So I'm sure that definitely, there could have been, you know, one particular female staff member that had quite a significant influence over these female students. It seems that, you know, that there's still also, it's strange that there's one respondent, or it looks like one respondent, male respondent, who said that a female role model had a major influence, whereas none of the male respondents said that about the influence of male role models. So yeah, I mean, they weren't asked to elaborate, so I'm not actually sure, but it would be interesting if I could find out.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Anyone? Okay, I see Fiona was actually suggesting that you do a PhD. Okay, sorry. Okay, well, I'd just like to thank you, Siobhan, for this presentation. It was really interesting. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And the third event will be in 3 weeks, and we'll send an email about that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for signing in and all the nice comments.